Hello everyone. Welcome back to my channel. My name is Sydney Morgan. If you're new here, make sure you give this video a thumbs up. You subscribe so you know when I come out with new videos, and in the comments let me know what you think or just say hi. For the video that I have today, I'm trying out something new. It's kind of like a test run on a small series that I would really enjoy doing because it's about solved cold cases. They fascinate me because they're always solved in such interesting ways, and there's these little tiny details that back in the day when these crimes happened that they preserve certain things, or the GED match DNA testing and stuff, like they crack down on them years later now that technology's evolved, and they get the freaking criminal. So in the comments let me know if you like this format. If you don't, tell me, but I think it's something that I would personally have fun doing as like a little mini series. Anyways, on to the cases that I have for you today. On September 15th, 1972, in Indiana, a 19-year-old girl named Pamela Milam was attending an event at the college where she was studying to become an English teacher. While she was at this event, she told her friends that were also there that she was going to go outside and she was going to go move her car to a different spot around the block. But Pam never came back. The friends didn't really take too much notice to this, but the next day when she didn't show up for work, the red flags went up. Her friends noticed it, the parents noticed it, everybody jumped into action, and police were notified. So Pam's father went to the parking lot where she was attending that event, and they started to search the area, and about a block away they found Pam's car. Pam's dad looked in the car, didn't see her, so he opened the trunk. And when he opened the trunk, he found his daughter's lifeless, bloody body. They also saw that Pam was bound by rope, and she was covered in dirt and leaves and grime. And so police, when they saw this, they decided to take samples of the dirt, and they actually found some DNA on her as well. But obviously they couldn't do anything about it back in the 70s because forensics, it wasn't there yet. So unfortunately, the case went cold. In 2008, investigators reopened the case, but they really couldn't get to the bottom of anything. Another 10 years went by, and in 2018, a total of 46 years later, investigators decided that they were going to try one more time. They had just a little bit of DNA left. So they sent it into Parabon Nanolabs, and they just prayed that they would come up with some kind of DNA match. And they got it. They got a familial match, and they said that it was probably from a distant cousin or something. There definitely was some family ties in there DNA-wise. So they start looking at the family tree, and they keep narrowing it down and narrowing it down until they finally found the guy that they were looking for. They matched it to a man named Jeffrey Hand. But unfortunately, Jeffrey was already deceased. Around the time that Jeffrey had killed Pamela, he had also picked up a couple who was hitchhiking alongside of the road. He took them to a wooded area nearby. He killed the guy, but then the woman got away. So he was later identified by this woman, and he was arrested. They did take this to court, but unfortunately it was acquitted because they said that he was insane. So he was just released back onto the streets to do whatever the hell he wanted. Then a couple years later, in 1978, he attempted to abduct another woman. But he kind of did this in front of an officer, and the officer chased him and shot him and killed him. And he died at the age of 29. On August 24th, 1998 in Florida, a woman named Sondra was a few weeks away from retiring. But she was working alone in a vintage antique store. That night, two teenagers had walked into the store after the hours that were listed said that they should have been closed. So they came in thinking, oh, they're open, I might as well go in. And they found Sondra on the floor, and she was stabbed to death. There was blood on the cash register, and the cash register was moved, and it clearly had been ran through, and the money was gone. But there was a woman in the store that night who saw a guy that was kind of like lurking around inside, and he didn't really seem like he was too interested in the things that were in the store, so she really took note of this. Police believed whoever had done this to Sondra had cut himself, because when they were taking all of the forensic evidence out of the store that night, they found a separate blood type from Sondra's on that cash register. So they believed the guy cut himself when he was stabbing Sondra to death. They also found a single fingerprint on the register. They preserved all of this DNA evidence after they collected it, but they didn't have anything and they had no leads, so the case went cold. 20 years later, in 2018, police finally received a phone call that they had a match on the fingerprint to a 51-year-old man named Todd Barquette. And it turns out that Todd did live in the area at this time. Todd was trying to get a job, so he submitted his fingerprints into the system through a job application. He had no criminal record, but like I said, he was known to live in the area at that time. I guess him and his wife were really big on antique shopping. They would buy antiques and either fix them up or sell them as is. So right there, they already had multiple connections to this guy. So they, on camera, they videotape this. They go and they find Todd wherever he is. He's out in public, actually. And they start interviewing Todd. And they're asking him, like, hey, have you ever been here? Do you know this woman? And he's like, yeah, we used to live in the area. Yeah, my wife and I antique shopped. And yeah, I possibly bought something that night. Then they confronted him with the fact that the fingerprint in blood on the register belonged to him. But the police didn't want that to be their only connection for Todd and Sondra. So the woman that was in the store that night and saw this guy, weird guy, lurking around, they came in contact with her again, and they gave her a 6-pack of photo lineups, and they did have Todd in there. She immediately identified him. She said, that is the guy that I saw in the store that night. So they put him into custody, and they decided, okay, we have the fingerprint match, but let's see if his DNA matches. So they took preserved kit from back in 98, and then they got a DNA swab from Todd, and boom, it was a match. He did plead not guilty, but in 2019, he was found guilty and sentenced to life. In 1979, an 18-year-old girl named Michelle Martinko was shopping at the Westdale Mall. It was a new mall in their town, and she went there because she got a Christmas gift from her mother, but her mother didn't bring it home. She was like, hey, I found this coat. I'm going to go ahead and give you, I think it was $180. Go to the store, try on that coat, and if you like it, get it. If not, you can spend the money on something else. Michelle didn't end up liking the coat, so with that $180, she left the mall and was walking to her car. When she got to her car, she opened the door and went to get inside when somebody came up on her, stabbed her to death in her face and her chest. The killer shut the door and he simply just walked away. Nobody saw anything. People saw Michelle walking to her car, but nobody saw the assault and murder happen. Michelle's parents had I think it was a 10 o'clock curfew for her. And as 10 o'clock passed and Michelle didn't come home, her parents really got alarmed because Michelle was absolutely responsible and they knew something could not be right. So they called police and they reported that she was possibly missing. The police asked where would she have gone? Where was she? They said she was at the new mall. So police go over to the mall, and the mall had been closed at this time. It was around 2 a.m. when they got there, and they saw the lone car in the back of the parking lot. When they approached the car, they saw Michelle hunched over the seat, and it was brutal. She was covered in blood, head to toe. While police were at the crime scene, they saw that on her coat she was wearing that there was more blood. So they took all the DNA and blood samples that they could, and they did come to the conclusion that there was a spot on her coat that did not belong to her. It belonged to somebody else, possibly her murder. 39 years go by with no arrest. In 2018, police submitted that blood sample that they had from her coat to GEDmatch, and they came up with a possible familial match. With this woman who had submitted it, they came up with, through the family tree, they're like, okay, this has to be like a distant cousin, a second cousin, something like that. They narrowed it down to 3 brothers in her family, based on like the timeline of when it happened, the location where the family was living. So they had these 3 brothers, and police had the DNA of the killer. So now they had to find DNA from all 3 of these guys and see if any of them matched. So they went for the first brother, not a match. Well, before I say all that, they didn't want to tell any of these guys that they were after their DNA. So what they did was the old school trick of like, wait for them to blow their nose and throw out a tissue, or like take a drink from a cup and collect it. So they did it through discarded property. The first guy wasn't a match. The second guy wasn't a match. So the third guy they went after, they were staked outside of a restaurant, and this guy drank a soda that had a straw in it. He threw it away, and as soon as he left, police swooped in. They grabbed this cup with the straw, and they collected the DNA from it. They sent it in for testing, and it was a match. The killer's name was Jerry Burns. Jerry Burns no longer lived in the area. He lived in the area like a little bit around the time that Michelle was murdered. So police took, and I think they put like on a cup or something, they put a camera on a cup. They went in and they started talking to this guy, and they said, hey Jerry, do you know this case? And he's like, yeah, I heard of it, but I don't know much about it. So they show a sketch of the guy who they thought that it possibly could have been. Through the DNA testing, they can come up with like these images of faces and stuff. And he goes, well, that doesn't look like me anymore, because he got old. I mean, it's 39 years later. And after Jerry is denying that he had anything to do with this, the detective comes out and says, well, guess what? We already took your DNA from a cup you threw in the trash, and it's yours. You killed Michelle. And he's like, well, we'll just have to see if the DNA matches, because they wanted to take another sample, because they have to do that to verify, you know, that could have been somebody else's cup that was thrown in the trash and they just thought that it was his. So they have to do it again. So they do it again. Boom, it is Jerry Burns. Jerry Burns murdered Michelle Martinko. On February 24th, 2020, he was found guilty. And later in September, he was sentenced to life without the possibility of parole. God, I love when these cases finally get solved, because it sucks because they got to live most of their life outside of jail when they should have been in jail. But these people, these criminals, they're like living their life thinking that they're all fine and dandy, and then one day they're like, got you, shithead. Now you're going to fucking jail. I don't know if I can say that on YouTube. I'm sorry. Anyways, seriously, let me know if you guys like this kind of content, because I do. I enjoy it. I know they're shorter stories, but sometimes like old cases are hard to find a whole lot of information on to do a full video, but I think these are fun. They fascinate me. So in the comments, let me know. Tell me, do you like it? Should I do more, continue, or is it a fail? Hopefully not, because I love this shit. Anyways, thank you guys so much for joining me for this video. Make sure you subscribe, you like, comment, and I will see you guys next time.